and listeners. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land of which we gather and meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. The TCAV would also like to formally provide a warm welcome to all our viewers and listeners, or viewer and listener, all across Victoria and beyond. This TCA initiative forms part of our professional development series that is positioned a particular lens on the business operations of tennis coaching with the theme of tennis coach to tennis business. So no matter how small or large these aspects are, we're going to delve in with our special guests surrounding those elements. It is specifically designed to assist our members and fellow tennis coaches to hear from experienced peers that are experiencing challenges and successes, and for this information to be shared within our community of practice, which is a group of like-minded people who share a common interest conducting a tennis coaching business in our discipline. We do welcome all our people that are tuning in. Please feel free to enter comments, questions, queries in the chat. We are more than happy to answer those, and if we don't get to them, we will certainly be in touch post this initiative. This will also be recorded as well, so if you're out on the courts, and as I look out the window, it looks pretty good at the moment, so there might be many of you out on court coaching, so this will be recorded and you can watch this at a time that's convenient for you or listen to it. So let's get started. We have two very special guests today that I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce to you. We have Julie Golightly and Shane Scrutton. So I'm going to throw, and we tossed a coin on this one, and I don't know how it ended up really, but we're going to start perhaps with Shane. Shane, what we'd love to hear, in a nutshell, and we could spend half an hour with you, 45 minutes, an hour, about all your experiences, what you've done before getting into tennis, and also your experiences now. But essentially the question being, what led you to being a tennis coaching operator, and what happened in the early years?
Sure. So I did the American college thing and came back to Australia and had played tennis at a fairly high level for a long time and got into teaching, and I was pretty lucky the way that it turned out at Eaglemont Tennis Club. My old doubles partner was coaching there and gave me an opportunity, and I managed to start there, and then being a pretty big facility, sort of fell into it, and next year I'll be celebrating 20 years at the same place. Julie and I have both had a lot of experience at the one club, so yeah, hopefully we can share some insights, some things that have helped us along the way, and obviously some problems as well. Don't need to tell any coach listening out there about how difficult it's been for the last 18 months in particular, but I think there's also some good news. I said I'm not going to mention the C word because we've had enough of that, I think, over the last year and a half, but I think it's also a time that coaches can look to reassess their businesses. There's certainly some opportunities, so hopefully we'll be able to talk through that in the next 45 minutes.
Terrific. Now, you've studied journalism, I understand, and you're also a PE teacher. So it's interesting that you made the shift from that career into coaching. What was the impetus for that?
I suppose you've got to make a choice at some stage, and once I'd got to a certain level, I was pretty busy. Every tennis coach out there knows that often it's on the court's the easy stuff. There's all the administration, all the staff, and all the payments and all the accounting and all that sort of stuff, and working with a database and emailing. And it just got to the stage where that was just taking too big of an issue, taking over too much time, and so I made the choice. I think the journalism certainly helped in terms of communicating with all the stakeholders. I've got a very positive relationship with the club, which is great, and And I think we want to talk about that today as well. Communicating and just how important that is. I often ask myself, if social media was no longer around, what would we do? In terms of communicating and in terms of, would we basically be able to survive? And often it's whoever's got the best communication skills, dealing with all these different stakeholders. They're the coaches, they're the business operators that will do really well.
A terrific story, Shane, how you chose the career path of tennis coaching, given your qualifications of coming from journalism and teaching. I dare say, being a secondary teacher myself, perhaps you just got sick of teaching secondary students and you wanted something a little bit different.
Yeah, although, you're finding that even in teaching, I no longer walk on the court and say, you've got to hold this group, you've got to do this. Teaching is much more about collaboration, and it's about empathy as well. And I think we've all had those stories recently where we've had people on the court, and they've just been in a different space to what they were. And I think these days, if you're a coach, it's much more about collaboration with your student, and you're asking them questions. I was recently coaching a lesson, and I thought to myself, I haven't actually said one thing. I've just been constantly asking. And I think that's something that's also aligned itself with teaching as well. Teaching is, coaching is much more about collaborating, asking questions, and finding out, why do people play tennis, and then also why perhaps they stop. And I think if you ask more, more of those questions, you get a much better idea as to, why people are playing tennis, and you can hopefully take advantage of that.
Terrific. And we'll touch a little bit more on that contemporary methodology, I suppose, and the way teaching and coaching has changed. And I'd love both of you to elaborate on that as we go through. But thank you, Shane. Julie, can I throw to you, same question. What led you to being a coaching operator and your early experiences?
Yeah, so basically same sort of situation with Shane. I was a good junior tennis player. I didn't know at 17 years of age, I didn't know where to go or what to do, go to uni or things like that. And I was playing state grade tennis there many, many years ago in the 80s. And I met this lady by the name of Cheryl Hewitt, which is Mitch's mum.
Who is that?
Of course we know who that is. And once again, it was just an off chance that I actually met Cheryl and got talking to her at afternoon tea, like we have. And she basically said that she was a tennis coach. She ran her own business. And I went home and had a chat to my parents because I was only 17 at that stage. And they said, oh, why don't you try and ring Cheryl or get in contact with her, which I did. And probably 2 or 3 weeks later after that, I was coaching up in Melbourne. So I was travelling 3 times a week up here to Melbourne. And Cheryl was my mentor. And I did training under her for 2 years with tennis coaching. So that's how I became a professional coach. I've been in the industry for 33 years now. Out of that 33 years, 14 years has been with Ocean Grove Tennis Club. I also coach now with Geelong College. I do a bit with them as well. I started with Geelong College. I actually had a stint there for nearly 16 years. Then my mum, had difficulties and things like that, and then I had a break from there, and then they've actually asked me back again, which is really nice. So I've been at college for 2 years now. What else can I tell you about myself? I've actually owned and operated an indoor tennis centre for 10 years. That was an experience in itself. That was just huge hours. And we eventually sold that. I probably regret that now, but we did sell that, and just purely because of I was working 18-hour days, and then we were having, children and things like that, and it just wasn't right for us. It just didn't sit right. So now I love the tennis coaching. I'm getting a bit older in the tooth with it all, and it's a lifestyle choice for me, my tennis coaching.
That's a terrific reflections, and I think our listeners and watchers can really appreciate that we really do have two preeminent premier coaches, not just in Victoria but across Australia, who have made a choice to stay with tennis coaching and have articulated why. I'd like to now, so thank you, Julie, for that, and I'll pass those comments on to Cheryl. But I do remember being a bit younger, remember you coming over to the house, and we do have a little sort of photo frame gallery, and you are actually in one of those photos. So there you go. So you were part of our business, and it was lovely. So let's now tackle some of these issues. And Shane and Julie, you raised a couple of them, and I think if we're looking at this tennis coach to tennis business, we really want to get to the tin tacks of running a business and all the things that contribute to it. We certainly cannot avoid, however, I guess the impact on our businesses in general as we emerge from COVID. So I guess my first question is, what have you observed and what has been the relative impact on your businesses, on your respective businesses? So we're looking at limitations, but also negative outcomes potentially, and then the positive outcomes. So Julie, can I perhaps maybe start with you? And I'd love this to be conversational. So Shane, jump in. So let's have a look at the limitations and the outcomes and what's been the impact emerging from COVID. So I suspect we're out of COVID, fingers crossed, and touch wood and all that sort of stuff. What's been the impact?
Emerging from COVID, how has it affected your business? Start with limitations and negative outcomes.
Definitely income, of course. That's probably the biggest thing. I would say engaging people again in a safe environment. What else would you think, Shane?
Yeah, look, it's just been really tough. You've had 6 or 7 lockdowns, so you've had, started term sessions. You've had, situations where people have paid for a whole term and they've, you haven't been able to do anything. Some coaches have been able to receive JobKeeper and some coaches haven't. And there's certainly a sense from a lot of coaches that they haven't been looked after as well as probably what they should have by the sporting, governing bodies. And so there's obviously a lot of coaches that have probably left the profession already or are looking to get other employment. So, you combine those things and you probably say it's a pretty bad time to, start a career as a tennis coach. On the other hand, you're looking at what's actually happened to society. You've got people working from home. You've got, I'm doing a lot more coaching during the day. Once people get that confidence back and they start to send their kids in, once kids are back at school, which they are, you'd like to think that next year could potentially be, a really successful, coaching year for coaches in Victoria. And there's absolutely no reason to think, why not? But it's been difficult because it's been no competition. And in some ways, people have got really good at taking tennis coaching lessons, not necessarily become better tennis players, but they've also had to feel like they've got to do something and getting outside. And I don't think that's been probably picked up enough either, just how safe tennis is. Through every lockdown, I never saw one example of anyone catching COVID from playing tennis. Sorry, I meant to say that word. So you sort of think, it's safe and, there's compared to all the other sports, and that's what's happened with golf. So while, there's been, a lot of coaches being really negative about tennis coaches, and in some cases that's completely understandable. I think as a profession we can look forward to next year, and this is also giving us the time to, okay, what sort of programs have worked and what potentially new programs might work. And I guess look at those demographic, shifts and actually take advantage of them and capitalise.
Terrific. So you can go on, Julie.
Yeah, and also just what sort of Shane sort of said was the tennis coaches. We're finding it really hard now because we've come out of COVID, is that we've got plenty of clientele. We don't have the tennis coaches. So that's our biggest issue at the moment, is finding tennis coaches to come and coach. And because we're regional, hopefully we will actually get coaches coming down for the sea change. We have our biggest thing, like positive wise, is that we've had a lot of Melbourne people come down, buy houses, and a lot of our clientele is Melbourne people at the moment coming down.
And I suppose it also leads on to the bigger picture of the TCAV as an actual resource. With all the experience of coaching experience on the board, the TCAV is looking certainly to become much more of a resource for coaches. I know in my experience, I've been able to call 3 or 4 coaches regularly during the lockdowns and just bounce ideas off them, or kind of work. Because if you're a tennis coach, you're doing a very specific job, and it's not always relatable to other jobs and other professions. But everyone has been pretty much in the same boat, so it's been good to have those conversations and work through things. And I think for all the coaches out there listening, there is a huge amount of resources that us as coaches can offer. And I think increasingly we're looking to, be much more to the average coach out there, who perhaps doesn't feel like they've been supported all that well in the past.
And so this leads me on to there's some great insights there in terms of advertising and promotion of your businesses at the moment as we emerge from COVID. And we will touch a little bit more and dig a little deeper into the staff issues, particularly the attract, develop and retain. What sort of things are you doing from a promotional perspective? Now, Julie, you're in regional. Shane, you're more metro. What's happening? What are you doing after coaching sessions and during the day to promote, advertise?
I guess in my situation, I really, didn't change anything. I thought, the best way to advertise is to get back on the court and for people to see you and to see that you're running lessons and to see that, all these, which at the time, very restrictive, issues around what you couldn't do aren't actually damaging your coaching program. And I think, being back on the court in itself was the best advertising you could do. And I'm not a huge social media person, and the question I asked before was, what would happen if we had no social media? But I think this is an opportunity for every coach to look at, the idea of communicating, and end of the day, all you really need to communicate well with your clients is a list, but you want to communicate effectively, clearly, precisely, and use your own voice. Use your own voice where, if people are talking to you, they get the sense that, you're the same person, as what your advertising or marketing might be. You want to have that sense of consistency. And I think that in itself, is the best form of advertising. If somebody walks off the court and says, that tennis lesson made me feel 20 years younger, they're going to tell other people about it. So I'm not one to harp on the advertising or marketing, but if somebody's saying that, then they're going to go and tell somebody else. And I know Julie's had clients, she's had for 5, 10, 15 years. Even Justin Middleton, from what I've heard, was a client. Yes. So I think, if you must be doing something right, and without having to advertise anything. So, the ability to maintain those clients for that amount of time is one, not easy to do, but 2, they're the clients that you want. And I think that's something perhaps that not enough coaches look at. Do you want a client for a long term, where, they're enjoying it, they're telling other people. So in that way, I think it's, being able to look inward, not necessarily outward, is a really good way to develop your business. And, word of mouth is really cheap.
Yeah.
Really cheap.
And the experience that your clients are having with you in the interaction and the genuine interaction that they're getting and the genuine interest you're showing is very, very powerful, as you're saying, Shane. Yeah. Julie, what do you think? What are your reflections?
With us at Ocean Grove Tennis Club, we're actually more word of mouth. So we haven't advertised a lot at all. Over COVID, over the last couple of years, just purely like what Shane sort of said, was that we actually, we get refers referrals all the time. And then because you've been in the industry so long, the people that you've coached, they've had children, so they come back to you and want their children coached, which is really lovely. And you see them growing up, married, and then they've had children as well. So it's more word of mouth for us, definitely. Over the break that we were having, with COVID and things like that, I did communicate with people via text, via phone calls, things like that. We actually started just recently competition. I think we might have started prior to you people up here in Melbourne. But we've got like 16 teams, and in that time we had to sort of collect all the children, try and get them all organised prior to, in COVID as well. And then actually say to them, okay, you're playing, this is when we're going to start comp and things like that. So I had about 13 kids just recently start comp a couple of weeks ago, and I made it an issue that I had to ring all the parents and see how all those individual kids went for their first ever competition, like first ever set in comp. And I did that, and just engaging the parents was really good. So hopefully we see the kids back on the court. I've got them coaching, and they're playing comp, which is great. Yeah.
What a terrific message, and all it takes is picking up the phone and having a brief conversation to show that you care and that you're actually taking a genuine interest in their children or adolescents. It just goes such a long way, doesn't it?
It's getting back to that idea of empathy. For the client, you're helping them out. And that's not a transactional thing either. Julie wasn't paid for that, for those phone calls. She did that because, she knows that the best way, best thing for her business is to develop players and to get them, and to support them and for them to improve and to enjoy tennis. And sometimes I think coaches can get caught in that whole, well, it's got to be transactional. What am I, getting out of it? And, I also get that as well, that you want to be rewarded for your, services, but there's those soft skills as well that play a big role, that's one phone call, which in the parent's eyes and the kid's eyes is actually instrumental.
They do pay significant dividends, don't they? And it's not such a difficult thing to do, and it's so well appreciated, I think, from the parent's perspective. And it's no different to what we do with the children when they walk in the gate. We ask them how the day was, we engage with them, we're genuine, and they get that interaction. So leading on from that, being head coaches and being extremely experienced in all this sort of stuff, so how do you transfer all that knowledge via professional development to attract, develop and retain your staff? Because you obviously want your staff to be doing similar things that are going to result in the successes that you've both had over many, many, many years. So maybe just a little bit of an insight into, have you lost a lot of staff? Yes or no? And if you haven't, how are you going about your professional development?
Yeah, look, I think there wouldn't be a coach in Melbourne running a club that hasn't lost at least, a couple of coaches, and through absolutely no fault of their own. If they were lucky, they were on JobKeeper, and if they weren't, then they, had to look elsewhere. But I think starting now is a real time to kind of refresh. And I've always looked at people that I've coached myself, because I've got to know them, I've got to know their parents, and I've used that as a resource. I've spoken to other coaches as well. And, the more relationships you have with other coaches, I think the better, in that, if you do need someone to help you. And there's a lot of different government programs out there now. I've got one student doing like a structured workplace program. So there's a lot of different things that you can look at, for young people to get into coaching, where, situations where they really didn't exist before. But look, I take your point, Mitch, it's been, very difficult. And I think, as a coach, the advantage you do have is that you are always talking to people, and you are also, it's all about the relationships. So, if you have a good relationship with, pretty much, everybody, there are going to be opportunities where you can get a coach. And in terms of professional development, I'm lucky I'm at the one venue, and so I've, am trying to constantly work with all the coaches to become better. And I think somebody said, look, you're only as good as your worst coach. And there's probably a bit of truth to that. Okay, so, and sometimes everybody wants you, everybody wants, Julie, everybody wants, the head coach. I think it's not actually feasible for that to happen. But if you're doing your, best to, support those coaches, to educate them, that's a really good place to start.
It's terrific insights. Shane, Jules, do you have dedicated times where you get your staff together, in particular now emerging from COVID, to say, look, here are the expectations. We're going to start from when, getting there earlier, setting up, and then as soon as that student gets out of the car or rides their bike or whatever they do, as soon as they get into that gate, there's a directive for your coaches to say, right, this is your job, very clear, go and do that, rather than staring up in the sky or doing something else. What's your expectation with that?
What we normally do, and once again, we are struggling for staff at the moment, but in the past, what we've done is, say for instance, we've got 2 Year 12, a boy and a girl at the moment. They play Section 1, competition, seniors, things like that. So they're quite capable at their tennis. But what we've actually done is, prior to starting our coaching this time round, is that we spent a few hours, 2 or 3 hours with them, gave them a booklet, or paper, of course, booklet, and just showed them drills, showed them some games, how we want them to engage with the kids, how we want them to speak with the kids, sort of talk our language the way we want them to talk to the kids, things like that. So they've been wonderful for us with the younger children. But once again, we would love them to go and do JD course and things like that. But I don't know whether they will do that, because they'll be going to uni and things like that. So that's what we normally do. That's probably it.
And I think it's also, as the, business operator yourself, in terms of the staff, to also find out what they want to do. I've had a few conversations with coaches recently where I've just said, well, what do you want to get out of it? In terms of, the hours, in terms of potentially what they'll make out of, tennis, because often, you're so busy, trying to train people that you might think, well, you might actually not actually ask them what they want to do. And so I think that's a big part of, okay, if you know what your staff want, you're much more likely to hang on to them. And every coach will know just how important it is that you've got, regular coaches that are there, that are, developing, but that are, gaining experience. It just makes your level of professionalism that little bit higher.
That's great. This is a question for both of you, and you can argue who answers this first. But recently, and I should point out, probably at this stage, it's good. We did have a TCAV board meeting the other week, and we lucky enough to have Wes Horskins and Lewis Miles back on the board. And I recall having a conversation with Wes about his coaches and coaches in general, and the expectation of their skills. So given the award that we sit in, is it enough now just to be a tennis coach without having some additional skills that can assist your business? And I'm just wondering whether that's something that both of you invest in, whether they do admin or PD or whatever it is, lesson plans, that your expectation is for that to occur.
And again, I've probably made it difficult for myself in some ways because I've done everything. And often coaches can find themselves feeling like they need to do everything because they probably acquired the skills to do that. But I think it's really important to look at that and figure out, well, what else can and especially an experienced coach actually do. And it's not always just about on the court. Can they help train some staff? Can they do some admin and that sort of thing? But it's also, I guess, depends on the individual, because you don't want to put, if you're the face of the business, you don't want to put the wrong person in the wrong spot, and then potentially, that could be disastrous. So I think it's probably getting that relationship working, finding out what the strengths and weaknesses, of your coaching staff are, and then working with them.
Yeah.
But I think most coaches would certainly be looking at that, because there's only a certain amount of hours you can do on the court, and certainly like Wes, the best operators are looking to expand their the skill set of their coaches.
And I mean, Julie, you still have to have a life, don't you? I mean, as Shane has alluded to, he's done a lot on his own, but he's investing in his coaches to be able to do other things, to potentially expand their experiences and give them some opportunities in other areas which will allow Shane to have a little bit more work-life balance. What about in your case, Julie?
So what, as in...
in extending the experiences and of your assistant coaches.
Yeah.
So providing them with additional things to do. So if it's raining and they can't get on the court, well...
Surfing.
That's what I was really trying to say.
That's what happens down there. 35-degree heat and everyone goes surfing. So,
They all bail.
yeah, they all bail. Yeah, they all bail. Definitely digital. Like I like that. The Zoom meeting stuff and the digital aspect of websites and Instagram and things like that. I'm learning that slowly, and that's where the younger person does come into that. I do actually have someone who helps me out with that a lot, Justin, so it's not so much the younger ones that do that, but I do have someone that helps him with the admin stuff and things like that.
Yeah, and that's where I think getting the right person is absolutely essential, because you want someone to represent your voice and your brand, and you don't want them to stay there for 2 months and then move on to something else, and then you've got to reinvent yourself. But I think most coaches would be kind of at that stage where, do they employ somebody? Do they do it themselves? That's just something that, and some coaches are doing it very, very well. And I think that's something that, in terms of a PD thing, something that, we as the TCAV board can really look to kind of, find out some more, and hopefully provide that to our members sometime next year.
And look, while we're talking from a very practical level, and this is terrific, this is really good discussion, because it really brings it down to a very practical level. Do you see room within the coach development accreditation courses doing more of this sort of stuff? So they certainly talk, we talk a lot about coaching methodology and hot shots and all those sorts of things, but do you see a genuine place for even to have some guest speakers like yourselves come in and other experienced coaches to talk about the practical day-to-day operational things that they should expect? Because I get the feeling sometimes coaches leave a course potentially, go into a business, and their expectation is just to be on the court, when clearly, with both of you running really good businesses, you can't do it all. It's just impossible. There's going to be a point in time where it's going to be, well, I can't. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of building this sort of thing into coach development and accreditation courses, as well as additional PDs?
Well, it's almost an emerging kind of, job kind of opportunity. It's a job that probably didn't exist 5-10 years ago. The whole idea of a social media strategist simply wasn't there, but it's becoming increasingly something that, like any small business operators, need certainly to look at. I'm sort of torn between that, and I'm also torn between, basically, and this is something that I certainly need to improve on. It's just, when I talk about communicating is, the regularity of it and just keeping people up to date, letting people know that you're there, that you're running these programs. Sometimes it's the simple sort of stuff, but if it's regular and it's consistent over time, people get a sense of who you are and what you, what you, I guess, stand for. But certainly, Mitch, that's a very good point.
Jules, what are your reflections on that?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think, years ago when we were coaching, like you said, we just coached. We coached on the court and we did a little bit of admin, but gee, times have changed now with our computers and what we can do these days. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be great.
So you'd be highly recommending Justin or a Justin-like person to come and help out?
Absolutely.
Yes. Justin Middleton, right?
That's
Justin, right?
That's it, yes.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I'm very conscious of time, and we can certainly have a part 2 to this because I think there's lots of practicalities to this. I mean, the last thing I'd like to talk about, and you touched on this, Shane and Julie, was the communication and the power of communication now, and what does it mean to play tennis? So tennis is a very safe sport. Tennis appeals from early years to being, there is no age limit to tennis. There's obviously a huge health and physical and mental benefit to playing tennis. So how much time do you spend on communication, parents, players, committee members, and ensuring that your philosophy and what you're doing is at the forefront, I guess. So you're almost always promoting yourself and you're always promoting your business because, as we know, contracts come up, it's competitive for clubs, etc. So where do you put communication?
Well, I think you just want to make yourself really hard to replace. And if you're communicating and you've got these relationships in place, that in itself is great insurance for your business. If you are constantly communicating and you're positive and you're helpful, if you're able to kind of help solve problems and solve issues, then you tend to find that people will, have a much better sense of, confidence in you. I guess it's been really easy to be super negative about coaching and the coaching profession in the last 18 months when a lot of coaches would have felt disenfranchised, which is, completely understandable. But, the ability to, I guess, to look inwards and, be the positive, helpful, tennis coach that can also help members, can help committees, can help associations. Certainly, you can do a lot worse, than that to help your business.
Terrific. Jules?
Communication, I think that's probably number one aspect, especially working with clubs and committees these days. Committees change and, you hope that you've got a job, the following year or your contract and so forth. I just think communication is a huge factor, just whether it be with the kids, engaging the parents, and also just being around the club as well. I do a lot more, I think, from, 5 or 6 years back, I probably wasn't at the club as much. I'm at the club a lot more. Looking at juniors play on Saturdays, and just chatting to people, and it's just word of mouth. And you'll rock up at other tennis courts and they'll chat. And
so it's really interesting as we wrap up today that we know our vocation. That there are complexities as we emerge from COVID, but within that there are lots of simple things that don't need a lot of thought. So both of you have mentioned, word of mouth, communication, empathy, training your staff, spending time with your staff, expanding their experiences, expanding their ability to assist you so that we keep people like you, Shane and Julie, in the industry. And that's only going to be good to promote our sport as a profession, as a genuine profession, to keep people in our sport, which we want to do. because in the past we've often had it as a transient job. I recall that I thought that I would do coaching until I got a real job. Well, that ended up being my real job, and I think that what you have both articulated today has identified the complexity of the job, but also there are some really simple things for coaches that are already out there, but also new coaches emerging, and also assistant coaches that are with head coaches to really tune in and listen and say, gee, I can do that one small thing that Shane and Julie mentioned, and it's going to make a huge difference. Get there 10 minutes or 15 minutes early, help set up the court, greet the children, talk to the parents. Those types of things make all the difference. Last words in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, Shane?
Last words in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, Shane.
This is the second PD we've had, and Warren and Lisa and Wes did a fantastic job on the first. So hopefully coaches out there have, been able to learn something and, get a little bit of insight, I guess, into running a coaching business. And, we're here to say that, look, it's not all doom and gloom, and we're certainly looking forward, for next year, and also for the TCAV board to provide these kind of opportunities and to provide a lot more benefit to the coaches out there. Yeah. Thanks, Mitch.
Jules?
Just with the COVID, there's been a lot of positives come out of it.
To us, but once again, I'd like to thank all our listeners and our watchers that tuned in. Obviously, as I indicated earlier, that this was going to be recorded, so if you're on the court or if you had other things to do, you can certainly go back in your own leisure and listen. And I do encourage you to really listen to some of the commentary and articulation from Shane and Julie, because there were some wonderful little gems and opportunities, I guess, that they spoke about from their own experiences, but also going forward. So I'd formally like to say thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Mitch.
And thank you, Julie. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Mitch.
We're very lucky to have you on the TCAV board. And as both of you mentioned, that's what the TCAV is here for. Tennis coach to tennis business, we are here to help and assist. So our phones are always there. Just ring Justin. He's happy to take your call. Send an email. I'm sure he's nodding his head in the background, and he's very happy to do that. But we're here to help in any way we can. We are going to have another a professional development initiative. We would love your feedback in terms of some of the topics that potentially you'd like to hear about and what you're experiencing, and in particular your experiences. So we're happy to cater and to provide some bespoke PD and to continue this series. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. And in the meantime, let's make sure hopefully the weather stays nice for us and happy coaching. So it's bye for now.